あるいはスプーンがですね、まるでもう念力をかけたように折れ曲がったり、そういった現象が、起きたということを聞いています。
ジョン・ハットン氏、私は電波信号や高電圧の分野を研究していたんですけれど、たまたまその実験の最中に偶発的に物が宙に浮いてしまうという現象が起きたんです。その装置そのものは高重力、つまり重力に逆らうパワーを作り出すという実験装置です。
アメリカの軍だとか政府が来て、研究資料を持ち去られたとか研究を邪魔されたというふうに聞いたんですが、そういう事実はありますか？
はい、カナダ政府に12年間妨害され続けています。彼は
Following sequences were taken in the laboratory set up in 1988 and show, in this case, a blue plastic plate about 6 inches or so in diameter. It moves and skitters around on top of the plywood table on which it's sitting, and in the background is the milk carton, paper with wax covering that you saw taking off in the Japanese UFO video clip just prior, and to the left is a white cardboard box containing automobile headlamps. Takeoffs that you see of these objects occur generally on the plywood board and fly up toward the camera, not up exactly above, vertically above, but slanting off toward the camera. This is why you don't see them falling back into the active area, except on several shots that we will see in a moment. The black spots that you see are burn marks that occur from time to time on combustible objects in the field. Notice that in that takeoff there was a slight hovering a few inches above the plywood table before the plate actually took off, and that only the plate and not the other objects took off. In this case we have a large aluminum billet with a hole through it. The inch ruler is used on the side to get an idea of scale. And there's a plastic simulated wood bowl moving around beside it. The aluminum piece is between 5 and 6 inches in diameter and approximately 4.5 inches in height, with a 2-inch diameter hole through, and is a solid piece. Notice there is independent movement of both the aluminum piece and the board and ruler on which it's sitting, quite independent from the bowl. It's as if all actions are under complete control of someone's active consciousness. In this case, Another object is placed on top of the aluminum. It is a steel piece, square steel piece with a hole through it. And we'll see that these two objects can be taken as one object, as if they are glued together, or move independently as the machine and or John desires. In this case, you notice that the ruler is not stuck to the plywood. It can be moved by the bowl. And in some cases, the two metal pieces seem to be glued together. In some cases, not. When the aluminum is tipped up, you would expect to see the steel piece on top slide right off, but it does not. In this most amazing of sequences, we're back to the plywood board with a number of burn marks on in this case. And we have a nail puller that is sitting on end, and shortly it will take off. The plywood is supported by two plastic pails behind, one partially in view, and the cardboard lamp carton is still in the picture. The ball in the background is a sphere from a ball mill that John has painted a dull silver, and it is approximately 6 inches to 7 inches in diameter and has a very rough surface, as can be seen through the paint. In this case, two objects are in independent control, and shortly the nail puller will take off, and yet the ball will still be performing its antics. It's interesting to note as well that when the ball lands back down on the platform in which it's resting, it does not shake it. It does not move the platform. The platform does not recoil from the ball apparently hitting or resting on the platform. There's a pure, non-elastic collision when the ball comes down to rest apparently on the platform. The question arises, is the ball on the platform to begin with? Interesting motions are shown here. Slow up and down, and twisting and rotating back and forth. The rotation occurs as if it is under the control of someone's hand and is quite distinct from the kinds of motions that you'd normally find in nature. Actions stop and start very suddenly with very large accelerations or small. This is a solid steel ball which must weigh 10 to 15 pounds or more. This is one of the clearest indications that I can see of inanimate matter being under conscious control. John, however, has not recognized any overt conscious effort to control the motions of the things that go on in the field, but admits there may be some subconscious activity. switch to levitation of semi-solids. In this case, a milkshake in a plastic container, and you can see it's starting to take off, tries to take off en masse, but only a portion of it is affected first. Starts rising out of the cup, and eventually the whole mass takes off. Here we have another sequence of this in a different part of the active area. Many wet marks on the floor from experiments with liquids taking off. Here's white paste in a white bowl, which attempts to take off, and you will see a glop of it after it hit the ceiling 10 feet above. Notice that there's an almost circular effect of the peaks. There's the main central peak to the right, and several other peaks forming around in roughly a circle, and the bowl takes off. And there's the piece on the ceiling. In this sequence we see some apple juice in a cup or glass taking off en masse along with the glass. The glass and the juice take off together. Note especially the surface of the liquid as it takes off. You note that it does not tilt. The liquid does not stay level with the perpendicular to gravity, for instance. It stays as if locked to the glass in which it is sitting. It does not swirl around. In this case, we have frozen orange juice, I should say apple juice, which takes off and leaves a chunk of frozen water at the bottom of the glass. The bit of white on the bottom of the glass you can see is frost. There's a slight motion of the glass as the bulk of the frozen juice separates from the ice that is holding it to the bottom. In this case, we have a small ring of aluminum which flips open like a jack-in-the-box, and the top portion actually separates and dances around and then fuses itself back on in a completely rigid kind of position. different setup this time, where we see a cast iron piece in black in front of a turned piece behind. Simply crush up, and eventually this piece melds into itself, forms a glob. These are examples of fracturing of solid material, primarily metals. The aluminum bar you see in front is approximately 1.5 inches in diameter. There's a ruler behind it, and it's perhaps 10 inches long. Under the action of the field, it simply gives up its tensile strength, and the crack forms, and a number of pieces break off. It's a better shot with the ruler scale behind. Fracturing sequences can take anywhere from essentially instantaneous breaking to well over half an hour, as the sequence from which these shots did take place. It is apparent that the material suffers from molecular disruption. Tensile strength disappears and then comes back instantly as the material relaxes and contracts. However, as it relaxes, it does not form a blob or a liquid state, except on particular occasions you'll see shortly. It maintains. Another short, fat piece of aluminum standing on end, acting like a chunk of jelly. It's approximately 3 inches tall and 1 inch and a bit in diameter. Another shot of the upright aluminum bar. Notice that it is actually plastic. The base is sitting on the plywood platform and not lifting off as a solid piece would. This is obviously a bulk effect, not just a surface effect. In this sequence, we see a plastic bottle that is empty but has the cap securely put on. Seems to be breathing. This is an odd action, as the cap is on tightly. The question is, where does the air go when this bottle collapses? It appears as if the Hutchison effect is able to reduce the density or the volume of material, such as, in this case, air, and in cases you've seen and will see, water and liquid in an ice bath. If this was to be done mechanically and a squeeze or pressure put on laterally sideways, the air pressure inside would no doubt force other parts to bulge out or to deform somewhat. This is not the case in this sequence. Here's another sequence showing similar kind of effect with liquid. If you note in the top left-hand corner, there is a reflection from the light onto the water surface. This is an ice bath with water. And the water will shrink away from the surface. There it goes. And reduce its volume and then come back up and back down and up through the ice, indicating that the volume of liquid itself is variable. And in another possibly related phenomena, the water does appear to boil, although the ice does not melt. It is a room temperature boiling or bubbling phenomena. As you can see, October 29th, 1988. A very active target area. The last sequence of this section, we see a piece of paper which is spontaneously turning to carbon as bits of it are heated up and smoke is coming off. There's aluminum foil crumpled up behind it.